Okay, can everyone see the agenda?
Make it a little bit bigger, please.
All right, calling the Finance Administration Committee to order on Wednesday, August 3rd, 2022 at 6:05 p.m. Noting that Councilmember Holloway, Councilmember Mayhew, and Councilmember Christensen are present. Mayor's present, City Administrator, and Finance Director. Don't breathe cookies, eat them. And supporting staff. If there's no amendments or comments or objections, we'll take the agenda as approved. Seeing no objection, the agenda is so approved. The item on tonight's agenda is further discussion of Agenda Bill 22-074, Financial Management Policy. And Finance Director, I think we turn it over to you to lead us. Yeah?
All right, good evening, Finance and Administration Committee. It's good to see you again tonight.
We'll pretend
she
that's true.
laughs.
Yeah, we'll pretend that's true.
Yeah. Okay, so last night's great discussion on the proposed financial management policy. We did provide some amendments. So a couple documents that was at the dais would be a redlined version of the proposed policy based on our conversations. You'll find throughout the document, there was some wordsmithing for the word should, like we had talked. And then of course, the reserve section were changes to reflect our discussion. And I hope that you will find that we've addressed what language you were looking for at this point in the discussion. We've also provided an updated preliminary forecast. That's the large one-sheet spreadsheet. That we've added title, we've added a version. We've also added assumptions to help in understanding where we're getting some of this preliminary information. And just a reminder, because this is preliminary forecast, because our goal is to develop that long-term financial model, but we know we're using this as a way to understand impact on reserve policy. We've also updated the format of the forecast to move out transfers outside of revenues and expenditures, and I believe we've captured that. We have then have updated ending fund balance and reserves, and then of course we have in the blue bands at the bottom of this worksheet, we've got what our current reserve policy is versus a proposed range in policy, and see how that impacts either of those, either the current or proposed reserve targets. So with that, we sent this out. Mr. Boutte is won't be joining us tonight. He did send out this worksheet in advance, so you do have that electronically as well, but wanted you to have the printed copy. And then the redline version of proposed policy was also sent in advance of tonight's discussion. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions about revised documents. Otherwise, we can then start back into where we left off.
All right, why don't I suggest, committee members, why don't we have a look at section 2 and just make sure that this has captured accurately our understanding of our discussion from last evening. All right, let's start at beginning of section 2.0. So there's a sentence added at the beginning of section 2.1. And I'm not sure why that's being added, since we're not a cash basis entity, we're a modified cash basis under bars. So why is this, I don't know why we added that, what we're trying to, why we thought that was important.
There was a brief discussion about that cash basis, and the goal was to define or describe how we operate and how we report.
Right, except for we don't use the cash basis. We use the modified cash basis defined by state auditor's office.
So we can add modified to that front of that.
Well,
sentence.
I would just, so I appreciate your answer. You're trying to, but I think here, I see what you're trying to say. Let me just think about what you said. Yeah, because this is sort of a because it isn't all revenues, it's all revenues received by year end, which is always means we're always in arrears on some of the revenues. So so there's a mismatch, right? I mean, if we're going to define it, we should. So then the question is, by the time we define the modified cash basis, if we helped or if we just confused?
I mean, that's a statement that comes, it's a partial statement on MRSE. If someone's looking up to try to find the definition of fund, if they were looking up for help with fund balance versus reserves, because that was something we were trying to clarify. And so this is a cash basis statement, but I agree, we are not cash basis, we are a modified. So it's really, if we want to take it out because we don't want to confuse, or if we put in a different definition.
So I appreciate your effort. Once I sort of realized why you'd added that, I find trying to explain the modified cash basis to people to be almost hopeless. They just sort of a bit. My thought is, I don't think we need it. I think it was a valiant effort, but I don't think we need it. I'd recommend omitting it, but if we're going to have something in, it should be actually define what we, our modified cash basis, which if they understand it will really make them confused. Like, why do you do that? That doesn't make much sense.
Right. And when we, at some point in time, if the city shifts to accrual, then we'll be modifying policy just to, catch us
Sure.
up. So,
Right.
so
I'd leave it out, but if you think it's really important, then fix it, would be my point of view. Any other council members have a point of view? So see what you think of
Okay.
that, okay?
all right, thank you.
I think you're fine without it.
You're gonna put modified in and call it good.
Well, no, then you'd have to, the definition isn't correct. So
Yeah.
you can't just change the name and then leave that definition, because that's a wrong definition.
Yeah.
Meaning that's actually not how it works. I'd take it out. Okay, anything else before 2.2? Any other comments? Oh, I had a comment. The first sentence in 2.0, I just think it's just not a accurate statement. I would take, and it doesn't add anything to discussion. I would just take it out.
Okay.
All right, 2.2, I got a little confused how we define this, because what I thought we said last night was we settled on saying that the reserve, the general fund reserve, should be put into a separate fund, like Fund 2 or 3 or whatever you guys decide to use. This seems to say that wouldn't happen, so so that's confusing me.
So what I did in the proposed changes is under 2.21 conditions for using reserves. I moved up contingency fund, because that's really 2.2.2 contingency fund, because the general fund really is the only fund with a contingency fund. there are actually 3 separate funds right now.
Right, currently, yeah.
So what this statement reflects is that the city may establish a separate, it would be a separate fund for contingencies, or may adequately set aside in fund balance that reserve portion. So that's where this statement was to give flexibility. But what we've talked about last night was that combining into one reserve fund. So essentially, we would be doing that, but the policy gives the flexibility. That's up to the council, and this is the example of flexibility versus control. If we want to put in there that the city shall set aside a reserve fund or contingency fund, then that's what we'll change this language to.
So slightly different than what you said. So what we talked about last night was the importance of not losing sight of what the reserve was that the council set. And so therefore, the way to accomplish that was to have a specific dollar amount that then moved to a reserve fund. So we could, so we don't lose the visibility. It doesn't sort of sit within, for example, 001, along with other, it doesn't get lost. So I thought the idea was, and we may not have been clear, but I understood it, correct me if I misunderstood, but I understood it as deciding, okay, let's do this. We'll have one reserve fund, but as part of the budget process, whatever the council decides to put into the reserve shall be moved. So whatever they decide to put in the fund shall be moved to fund 002 or whichever fund you want to use.
Right. So in the forecast here, it's combined, because if we thought that it could be difficult to, if we took $1 million, let's say, and took it out of beginning fund balance, to separate it out, to show that there was reserve, but, so that's why it's still combined. And policy is stating that we may separate it out in the fund structure, in the budget, and in the budget documents, we would define to say that our ending fund balance, that we'll endeavor to achieve X target, and we're gonna have $1 million or 2 million or what have you in the reserve fund. But the forecast would have the dollars combined, so it wasn't confusing.
So I understand exactly what you just said. And my understanding is that we decided that you should not have that flexibility, that you should move it to a reserve fund and therefore break out that ending fund balance between the reserve
And fund
and
balance.
I guess it would be the excess or whatever you want to call the amount that's beyond the reserve.
Then we would want to change policy. In this statement in the contingency fund is that the city of Snoqualmie shall, I would recommend shall establish a separate fund, and we take out, so we'll change that.
Am I correctly capturing what
Well,
we were discussing last night?
exactly why we had, in my opinion, why we had the conversation. There's confusion between fund balance and reserves, and they are related but separate entities. So we need to instantiate that in the budget.
So I think you end up adding one row into your, or maybe it's two, isn't it?
Well,
A
we're
row-
gonna
a
have to,
separation.
separate in beginning fund balance, we're gonna have to separate that out, and we're gonna have to separate that out in the ending fund balance.
Good point.
So Mr. Boutte and I will work on how to best show that in this. Again, in our long-term financial model, that's what we had a conversation, a kind of a kickoff today with Jana, our budget analyst, on starting that model. So,
Okay.
So I will change that in the policy, shall establish a separate fund for contingencies, or we'll call it reserves, just so we're crystal
That'd be
clear.
great, yeah. Okay, and then, yeah, so figure out how to solve the presentation here. In my mind, I'm thinking you have 3 rows in the green, which is reserves, excess or something, total fund balance, but you guys decide what works
I'm
best.
not sure you need. The reserves plus the excess becomes your ending fund balance for the year, which becomes the beginning fund balance for next year. I don't think you need to restate at the beginning of the year what the reserve is. You just need to state it at the end,
So you can see it down to the
yeah,
left,
it
yeah.
all combines down, goes back out, comes down, but you only need to say, for this year, we're going to have a funding in a reserve of X amount of dollars.
We'll
But-
update this format then in the next iteration and send that out to you.
Okay, so we still in 2.2?
Yes.
So second paragraph. Fund level should be, well, just to change it, you can't say reserve fund level should be exactly 15 to 20%. Okay, 15 to 20% can never be exact. So, nor can it be approximate. So I would take approximate, redundant to stating a range. And then down there were reserves. Again, at least in my contract parlance, may is an unlocked door, should is an unlocked door with lemonade on the other side of it during a hot day. Shall and can is a funneled path. So I would prefer that we put reserves can be used at the discretion of the city council to meaning that it is the city council's decision to tap into those.
So if I hear you correctly, you want to change the word from should to can.
Can.
Where's that?
2.2.1,
Got it.
second paragraph, reserves may was changed to should, which is now going to be changed to can.
Yeah, should is still discretionary.
So let me go back to the second paragraph, see if, because I had a similar thought to Councilmember Holloway. I was going to suggest that that sentence be shortened, the first sentence, which currently reads the general fund, instead just have it say, the reserve fund level should be 50 to 20% of expenditures. Now this is really, really important. That comma completely changes the meaning of the sentence and it cannot be there. So remove that comma, so it's the reserve fund level should be 15 to 20% of expenditures less transfers from the general fund, period.
Oh, okay.
The reserve fund level should be
15 to
15 to
20%
20%.
of
Okay,
expenditures, no comma, less transfers from the general fund. Then I think the second sentence just goes away since we're going to have it in a separate reserve fund now.
okay.
I think that captures what you were saying as well. Okay. Councilmember Christensen, you okay with that?
Yep.
So were you saying that 2.2.2 would based on this discussion, would no longer be needed, or I'm not sure I followed you earlier on 2.2.2?
No, I moved it up to underneath the general fund because in my opinion, I believe it's needed because you've established a separate fund and it's a reserve fund. The sentence now reads, the city of Snoqualmie shall establish a separate fund for reserves assigned or committed to the general fund for unforeseen expenditures.
You're reading from what section?
2.2.2. So I'm
What would it say?
in 2.2.2,
Yep.
the city of Snoqualmie shall establish a separate fund for reserves assigned or committed to the general fund for unforeseen expenditures.
Can we just can we just do exactly what you said, but stop after the word general fund? Just stop there? Because I think earlier we listed more than just unforeseen expenditures as being things it was eligible for.
Sure. All right.
And so we're going to call it a contingency fund, not a reserve fund, is that?
They're both. You can call it a contingency or a reserve, so we can call it the
Councilmembers
reserve fund.
Have any thought on, is either one of those particularly more useful to understanding by lay people?
Medically disagree with that statement.
Which?
There's reserves,
Yeah.
and then there's ending fund balance. They are related but separate things. We need to get that concept in, or I need to be re-educated on all this. Ending fund balance is not necessarily a bad thing. Going below reserves is.
So let's call it reserve fund,
Done.
if that would be okay. Yep, that solves it, yep.
I'll see if if this still keeps getting conflabbed together, I'm gonna go nuts. But, okay.
All right, anything else on 2.2? Councilmember Christensen, I assume you were good with that decision? Yep. Anything else on
I have a question
Mayor,
for you.
go ahead.
So under 2.2, and we were talking about should be 15 to 20% of expenditures less transfers from the general fund. You wanted to get rid of the whole next sentence?
Right, because we're not going to have an unassigned fund balance. It's going to be in a reserve fund.
But what if it falls below 15%?
If what falls below?
Because it talks about,
It's talking about it's talking about a unassigned fund balance. We're not going to have an unassigned fund balance. Or, well, we will, but it won't be part of the 15 to 20%. It'll be whatever's left.
This is the
excess.
confusion between contingency funds and fund balance. Contingency funds should not fall below 15%.
okay,
Fund balance, well, as long as contingency funds can't fall below, mathematically, it will never fall below 15% if you keep the reserves there. But taking away reserves, if it does, okay, fine. That's not the restriction. So, again, this, like I said, this is the mixing of those two terms. And if you can either change it to say reserves should never fall below 15%, or because we've decided to put them on a separate line, Chair was saying, just take it out. We've already talked about reserves and said they must be maintained between 15 to 20%.
The city attorney has raised his hand and
Ah.
would like to speak. if
Uh-huh.
I'm here.
City Attorney, hold on, let's see. Yes, City Attorney, please go ahead.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I tried to start my video, but it says I can't because the host has stopped it, so I'll just be the disembodied voice from the ether. Just a comment on the verb usage. You know, the law, the courts recognize the distinction between may and should on the one hand and shall on the other. Can generally refers to whether an act physically can be performed. May means it legally may, it's permissible with the discretion of the council. So just as far as changing may to can, I recommend you leave may. If it's may at the discretion of the council, that means it is only permissible with the approval of council. Sorry, this I think Councilmember Holloway's laughing. It's just a drafting piece just for this reference and maybe other ones if it comes up.
Bob, coming in here, we changed it from may to should, and then I proposed changing it from should to can.
Yeah, I'd leave it to it may or should is fine. I'd leave can out of it unless we're talking about, you know, I can run a mile in 5 minutes or less. No, I can't. I may try.
So he's saying may is a term that gives permission, can
Should,
simply.
right, should is fine there too, if you're talking about, but if you're saying, for example, it may at the discretion of the council be used for these purposes, I would leave it as may and not change it to can. I think is where I heard that.
I think we took it aboard. Thank you, City Attorney.
All right,
Any-
thanks. That's all I got.
Okay, thank you.
Whoops, sorry, I'm lowering that.
So I will endeavor to keep a better eye on if you or anyone raises their hand. Thank you, Mr. Sauerwein, for bringing that to my attention. So, Councilmember Holloway, do you have a thought as to which of the words you prefer?
Well, if attorney advice is to go back to May, I'll say go back to May, but hang on a second.
I'm okay with going back to May, if that is of any help. Councilmember Christensen, do you have a view?
I'm agreeable to May.
Well, other than I would change, I would do other changes. Reserves may be used based on the approval of the city council to da-da-da.
Would you mind adding that?
I just want to make sure that it's the council that says, we're going to spend these monies to do these things.
So maybe just to make the sentence a little, so reserves may be used
Based upon the approval of the city council to,
with approval of the city council too?
okay,
How's that sound, Ms. Ferguson? Yep. All right. 2.3 then. So I had a comment at 2.3.1. The revisions say within the most recent utility rate study, I would just put a period there and strike the rest. Because I think actually, I don't know what assessment means in this context, but it's usually a longer than 10-year look, and in any event, I think we just say within the most recent utility rate study period, we've accomplished the point.
well, and is that utility capital funding obligation?
Well, it's under the section called reserve level target for enterprise funds, which means the utilities.
Okay.
Any other thoughts on 2.3.1? All right, so 2.3.2, this is good. We added the reasoning. I'd suggest, it says in support of improving the city bond rating. We do have a good bond rating, or at least we did the last time we asked for one. So I would say in support of a strong city bond rating. Because at some point you
Taking out
can't
that-
improve it anymore because it's already maxed.
The strong rating, I agree with that. They've taken out that financial management score.
Oh, have they?
Oh, yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
Would that be okay, wording, or?
That works.
Okay.
Yeah, just fine.
All right, any other thoughts, 2.3.2? Any thoughts on 2.3?
We took 2.3.5 out? We consider that now just part of the 15 to 20%, somewhere in there?
We took that, we moved
No.
that into 2.3.3. So we're in enterprise fund now, and so that 2.3.5, which was a financial indicator under the enterprise funds, now we moved that out, and that's where 2.3.3 was modified to include emergency repairs in that operating expenses, and added language about a not to
Oh,
exceed.
and the emergency reserve, okay.
So if you remember, the discussion last night was, it might be that in thinking about this, they might identify that two of these didn't need to be stacked, but rather could cover the same thing. And so that, it looks like that's what they did conclude, that operating and emergency reserves could go together.
Okay, I'm good, thank you.
The only question I had is, it says not to exceed. Well, I don't think we need that language. We could say 90 days of operating expenses up to 1.5% of. I don't think we should prohibit that from exceeding, is what I'm getting at. I mean, we could say the range should be 90 days of operating expenses to 1.5% of operating expenses as a range, kind of similar to how we did in the general fund, but I wouldn't prohibit it, because if we prohibit it, then we're gonna have to say what's supposed to happen with the excess. I think it just sort of opens up a can of worms.
This might be a good place for approximate. 90% or approximately 1.5% of operating expenses.
Well, I get the impression that there's a range where 90 days the low end and 1.5% would be much higher, that there's a range there that's actually fairly large.
That was the goal, is to set a ceiling for this particular indicator for operating reserves, because in the enterprise funds, we have set aside for the capital funding obligations, we set aside for debt coverage, we set aside for debt service.
So let's just say there's a range, 90 days up to 1.5%, which is the same concept, just doesn't use the specific language of not to exceed. It just says up to.
So I didn't hear the other part. Your assumption is that 90 days is a minimum.
Right.
What percentage is 90 days of operating expenses?
See, math would be 1/4 of a year. It'd be 25%. Point.
2 to 3
25%.
months.
Be 3 months, be 25%. So it's 25. It's not the minimum then.
No, that's right. You see the math? So
90 days is now the maximum, 1.5 is the minimum, we capped the minimum.
90 days is a common operating threshold in
no, we
in
get
utility
that.
funds.
He's just
Yeah,
saying
but the
mathematically
math
that would
is-
be 25%, which
One
is more
point-
than 1.5%.
Right, well, 1.5 was in the general, in the general governmental, we have that 1.5, and I think that was just the comment last night to add in that for the enterprise fund emergency reserves. But I think if we were to go 90 days up to 180 days, then we're consistent. So that would be,
Or if you just use this, you would just flip the ordering. You'd say operating emergency reserves dash 1.5% of operating expenses up to 90 days of operating expenses. Just the same numbers, you just reverse them so it logically makes
90 days
sense.
is the more larger number.
okay.
Did you have a comment, Councilmember Christensen?
Yeah, I'm just still not entirely sure that flipping it that way resolves the issue though, right?
Well, because the low end of the range is 1.5%, yeah? It's saying the high end of the range would
Talking
be,
about 1.5% of the operating expenses.
uh-huh.
Well, I just take the 1.5, take it out.
Yeah,
That's
I-
what.
For utilities.
Just call it 90 days.
You've got to have 90 days.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So then this, see if I'm capturing this right. We'd say 2.3.3 operating and emergency reserves dash 90 days of operating expenses reserved for water, wastewater,
Yeah.
and so forth.
Take out the added clause.
What is our operating, so this operating expenses, what are operating expenses? Is it about 2 million a year? Is that in, do you know off the top of your head?
Let me take a look here. I've got a lot of files open, so we're gonna be a bit slow here.
It's a sizable chunk of change.
I heard that there's an IT need for a more powerful computer for the finance director.
I just actually got one.
No? Okay.
So our operating expenses in the 2022 budget are about $7.3 million.
So that's the expenses, not including capital, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so 7 times, where's my calculator?
So divide by 4, so 1.6.
Would you say it was 7.2?
7.3,
7.3.
That's general.
that's enterprise fund, utility funds.
So that would give us a reserve of 1.8 million, which sounds about right. We think about what happened with Canyon Springs, that was over 1 million, but in the vicinity of 1 million, I think. Is that about right?
All right.
And then you'd still have, so even were Canyon Springs to occur, you'd still have 800,000 in case of,
Yeah. And we
Something
build
else
it back up from there.
yeah, and then you build back up from there.
Okay.
So hold on.
Well, unless I'm looking at it wrong, isn't the, so you're talking about the water operations, sewer, stormwater? Okay. I think it's like, wasn't it, maybe I had the wrong chart, 4 million? Instead of the general, because we shouldn't be looking at the general fund, right?
I'm looking at the,
Did you give us the biennial number perhaps?
I'm looking at the 2022 expenditures. This was from the budget ordinance. And I've got here, I got Fund 401, 402, 403 operations, and that total was 7.3 million.
But don't those three funds include transfers out?
No, the transfers are separate. The transfers are a total of $6 million.
Where do they, how do we, I've forgotten how the mechanics works. I know we end up with a separate or multiple separate reserve funds, I think. Where does the revenue come in and then how does it transfer?
We have, let me share my screen here. Okay.
Oh, yeah. These are the different than I have.
So these are the expenditures for the water, the utility operations. That's 7.3 million. This is a separate column for transfers.
I see.
And
So we
that's 6
bring the
million.
revenue into 401 to 403, then we leave the expenditures there, but the capital, we transfer out to the capital 417.
Yeah, here's the capital 417.
Yep.
And so you can see that those transfers are coming in, and yeah, we've got column H here, or J is. No, yes. You need a pointer, right? You need a pointer.
I just
Right.
have an older one, that's why.
Okay, so, yes, so the transfers into the capital, utility capital fund is this 3.6. These are the capital expenditures, and there is no transfer out.
Right, so the fund balance, yeah.
Okay.
So 6 million transferred in from 401 to 403. No, something else. Oh, because we sent some to debt service fund. Yeah, that's what happened.
You're right. I'm glad that you mentioned that, because we have, Mr. Boutte and I were talking about that. What's separated out here is this is by fund type, and so these debt funds, 407, 408, should technically be with the utility funds, because they're enterprise funds, and then I think
Okay,
that
so
was
if we
the only-
just to show the math.
Yeah.
So, no, don't move. So if we go look at Fund 401, 402, 403, we go over to the transfers out column. We've got a total of 6 million, a little over 6 million.
Yes.
That 6 million goes, 3.6 million of it goes to 417. That's 2 columns to the left. No, up a little. Right there,
Still at 417.
right?
Okay, yep, right
And then
here.
the remainder goes down into Fund 407 and 408. So you take those two together, plus the 3.6 million, you get the 6 million that transferred out. So that's the ins and outs there. So back to the main point, which was how much were the expenditures, it's those 3 columns together, and you're saying that adds up to about 7.3, right?
This is the total. This is the monthly amount. This is 3 months, 90 days.
What you said?
Oh,
Oh, no. Okay, but if we just look in the column, if we just look at, you did some math, you did some quick math on the side for us.
yep.
Nice, got it. So that 7.3, that's the sum of the 3 numbers in the, right, that he's pointing out to now, those 3.
There.
Or who, is that you? Who's driving?
I'm driving.
You, that you're pointing at now. That's the sum of those 3.
Some of these 3.
Okay, so Mayor, are you comfortable now with that 7.3 million?
Yes, I am. My chart is way different than hers. So, yes, I am. Thank you. It says
Every good accountant can give you, never mind, I'm gonna get into trouble. Which ones do you want? You want these numbers, you want those? So, okay. So then that gets us to the 25% or the 90 days being about 1.8 million. So is everybody comfortable with that idea? Now, so the one thing I just want to bring up in that regard is, do we have that much currently? So actually, we probably can see it just on the screen, can't we? Do we have, because I believe that we don't have that 1.8 million. I don't believe we have any of that set aside, but I just want to check if that's correct.
You know, I don't know the answer to that because
Okay.
this is that snapshot in time for budget setting.
Good. So I am very confident that I'm right, that there's zero of that 1.8 million up there. So therefore, the question is, over what time period do we get to the 1.8 million? Because I don't think we want to try and suddenly come up with a 1.8 million hit to our utility funds in 1 year just to set aside reserves. If that makes sense to people. So I think we want to give them some kind of a, not them, us, give ourselves some kind of a ramp period, if you will, to get there. So I don't know if we want to specify that or if we just want to put, yeah, so I guess that's our question, is how do we want to say, by policy, how do we want to say that we build up, over what time do we want to build up to that level? Does my question make sense?
If I can add in, what I've highlighted here was the estimated ending fund balance.
And
Right.
how much does that add up to?
That is 1.7.
Oh, so maybe we are pretty close.
Close, and in the proposed policy, there's that statement in it is, what does the council do when you've gone below your targets? So that is, in the proposed policy says is that in the next budget cycle, you're going to identify, you're gonna budget, you're gonna set rates, you're gonna, you're going to fix it, work on fixing it in the next biennial.
Just if I could just make the comment, it's my belief that the reason those fund balances are there is because we've been very conservative when we've done the rate studies as to what the operating expenses would be, as well as what the rates would generate. So in reality, our rates are generating more than we predicted they would, which isn't surprising because we're kind of conservative on that. Similarly, our expenses, I believe, are coming in a little bit lower than we thought they would. Again, no surprise, we estimated those a little high. So that would logically create a fund balance over time, which is what I think is why that fund balance is there. So that doesn't surprise me to see that.
Mike Chambliss has his hand up.
Director Chambliss, go ahead.
Thank you. I also would like to remind you that we've been running at half staff this year.
Could you just repeat that?
Our utilities department is down 6 or 7 positions this year that we're not having much luck filling. So that's also another reason why there's excess money.
Got it. Okay, so the good news is, as a result of that, we've got most of our fund balance, our reserve
And
funded.
this was budget, so this is not,
Oh, so what he's pointing out is that in reality, we'll probably come in better than that.
yes,
Got it.
thank you. Great.
Yeah, and I have not seen that we have done that analysis of here's what our rate study said we ought to pay if you have actually did the analysis compared. We'd have to do what was expensive, but I believe the rate study did have its own contingency in there, a buffer, call it buffer at that stage, and that's probably that buffer.
So I'll just share with you that during the process of the rate study being done and the initial drafts, I did the analysis you refer to and brought it to city staff and to the firm doing the rate study. And as a result of that, they actually were not quite as conservative as they had been, because I showed how especially conservative we had been. So because I went through that process is the basis for me making these statements that I know that we're kind of conservative in how we've done these rate studies. And there was a whole discussion that was had about, well, you you don't want to go the other way, because then you get yourself into real trouble with having to do big rate hikes, better to be able to kind of come in a little better than planned. And then as you look out at future rate hikes, we program out rate hikes for 6 years. Then as you get there, you can actually say, well, maybe you don't have to go quite so much. That's a better than, sorry, we're actually gonna have to do more than that.
Yeah. Now for the next rate study, setting these indicators are that is where the rate study will have to follow, is that we will have to ensure that our
Right.
that our
you have that
utility
1.8,
funds,
yeah.
so we will have very clear targets for the rate study, and we can connect the dots. And
Yep. Okay, so based on that discussion, then, are we all comfortable with what we've said here, which is the 25% target? Okay, good.
And we're almost there, based on.
Right. Actually, by the end of 22, sounds like, based on Mr. Chambliss' comments, we probably are there.
Yep.
All right, shall we move on to 2.4? Any comments on 2.4? I have a comment, which is that we start out, there's the first sentence, there's that first paragraph, there's the first sentence, which looks great. I would strike the rest of that first paragraph, because it purports to say what the council's thinking was when it set a CIP, when that may or may not represent their thinking. And in any event, each council will decide what their logic is for the CIP. So I don't think we can make that as a policy statement. And more important, I just think it's unnecessary. Let's just say the first sentence and then move on. I don't think the rest of that paragraph is really adding anything. And I sort of hate the idea that we say something where, if that's not actually what we're doing, then someone starts waving this around saying, hey, you're not following the policy. And then we say something like, oh, well, we never meant that. Well, if we don't mean it, let's not say it. But give you a chance to read it. Any different thoughts? Yeah.
No, I'm having issues with it. I understand the first part of it, we have REIT funds and it should be used.
No, we're back on 2.40.
We're back on 2.4.
Well, it's 2.4 without a third digit.
Okay, I'll wait.
it's the opening statement to that section.
Yeah. So I think the first sentence is great, and I would just stop there for that. And, within the first paragraph, just leave it as the first sentence and then pick up with the second paragraph. All right, move on to 2.4.1. Anyone have any comments on 2.4.1? Okay, if not, I predict, Karnak says Councilmember Holloway will have a comment on 2.4.2.
Ms. Holloway, you need to speak into the mic. I'm receiving texts from people that can't hear you.
All right, so we start talking about the REIT fund, and we say that the REIT fund should be based on our everything, the 6-year CIP and debt service obligations. And the problem I'm having with REIT fund reserves should be maintained at a level sufficient to ensure viability of future CIP fund. Okay. Which reserves?
In the REIT fund, we have a separate special revenue fund where REIT is collected, tracked, and a transfer out based on the CIP. If the
Okay,
council,
but I'm making a distinction in my head between the word reserve and ending fund balance.
Well,
Are you referring to ending fund balance here or reserves?
what I'm referring to and I understand the confusion, but if the REIT fund is gonna have reserves, because essentially, special revenue funds are meant to be spent. So, the reason that reserves is put in there, again, is the ending fund balance and the reserve definition. So if you want to use fund balance, then that's fine. So we changed the word reserves because I don't recommend that we separate a REIT reserve fund, because we already have a special revenue fund designed to specifically use up that source.
Let me try and give some background on this. So I was also going to bring up this. So historically, the city of Snoqualmie has kept a reserve in the REIT fund. And it's been equal to about a year's worth of REIT, maybe even more, about a year's worth of REIT collections. So in essence, we'd collect REIT and just sock it away and then spend it the next biennium. The historical reason why that happened is long before I was on the council, probably back when you were freshly on the council, but the finances of the city looked very different. And so the problem is we were really struggling to, first off, fund the things, the CIP things that we wanted to fund with REIT. In fact, there were some periods where some of that actually got redirected to the operating fund to help. And the second thing was that it was a young city growing. It was very hard to predict what that REIT amount would be. And so there was a great reluctance by the council to commit to spending something in the same year we were collecting it when it was very volatile and they weren't confident we would collect it. So that's when this reserve policy got established, and I think it's just sort of continued through. My own point of view is the REIT is actually very predictable now, or certainly a predictable low end is a low end is easy to predict. But more importantly, I don't think we need to reserve for it. I think, and in fact, when I think about what's in the CIP proposal that's come, I think that the proposal has looked at our REIT collections and presumed an amount to come in from REIT using exactly what I'm suggesting, the sort of a minimum level that's been used or an average level. So I think we've grown beyond this, and just causing that money to sit there and wait to be spent for 2 years serves no purpose anymore. The old purpose was we weren't sure it was going to come in. Well, now we are. So let's go ahead and get rid of this policy.
We had the distinction then also of non-recurring REIT versus recurring REIT. And when we were the fastest growing city in Washington, it was mostly non-recurring REIT, and we tried to sequester that money, the ending fund balances, to focus non-recurring funds on non-recurring expenses, as a police station, fire station, whatever you want. Those things we needed to put in place to support the growth we were doing. It was the only way to make this work. Otherwise, our general fund was going to be cannibalized.
So would you concur that times have changed and that really isn't necessary anymore?
Our level of non-recurring REIT will be much less, and it's primarily going to be recurring REIT, and that should be used for ongoing capital needs.
So therefore, my suggestion is let's just eliminate this REIT reserve entirely. So that sentence that says REIT reserves, just eliminate it.
We don't have a REIT reserve.
We do?
No, we don't.
We don't?
How is the REIT reserve calculated, and what is it used for?
It's
we have an ending fund balance. I have no argument that we have an ending fund balance. I don't know that we've set a policy that we have X amount of money in reserve and REIT.
I think you're right. I think it is. It's been a policy about holding the fund balance until the next biennium. You're right. It hasn't been a dollar amount reserve.
Dollar amount or percentage or,
No, you're right.
or reason other than let's not spend today's money till tomorrow and we know what we got.
Yeah. So,
So call it ending
Therefore-
fund balances, but not
well,
reserves.
well, if the whole conversation becomes moot if we just strike the last sentence. Because the whole concept just is gone.
I don't mind if you say ending fund balances should be maintained, or, yeah.
No, but I'm arguing why maintain, why do that? Why not just be done with it? REIT goes into the capital funds and you're done.
Because your capital plan may, in essence, put a requirement, you may have a big capital expense coming up. So in 3 years, so in years 1 and 2, you start to build up the REIT ending fund balance to handle it. Okay, so
Or-
you do want the ending fund balance to at least acknowledge future large expenses.
Well, or do you want to just do that in the CIP fund itself? Sorry, in the capital fund itself? Let me tell you, it sounds like a riddle. The two big pieces that go into fund balance that result in fund balance in the capital funds are the REIT and the sales tax on construction. So sales tax on construction is accumulated in the capital fund. Why not just let them both accumulate in the capital fund? We have line of sight onto that's how much has built up.
So REIT is just a path through to the capital fund.
Yeah.
REIT is kind of the capital fund reserve. I mean, essentially, because if we keep it in a special revenue fund and we only use it for capital.
Yeah.
So I would I would recommend that we strike that last sentence.
Okay.
And you have in the CIP document now, when it's adopted, you have that cash flow, you have that outlook on REIT funds, and it's specifically utilized for capital improvement.
So let me ask, the fund balance that is currently in the REIT fund is not part of the capital fund balance that's in the CIP, is that correct?
It is, so it's in the financial statements. It's just that it is.
In the CIP, I'm saying.
Right, in the CIP, it is in capital. It's included
In
in
the
the
fund
capital.
in the capital fund balance.
Yep, statement of sources, yes. In the financial statements in the CIP, REIT is included.
But I think you only include REIT collections, not the fund balance that's sitting there.
It's a source, so, and that's why we put in the separate cash flow for REIT, because it is a source for the
remember-
individual projects.
Do you remember, let me just look for the
Pull up
page.
the capital plan.
You were gonna ask her what page out of that document.
And I'm gonna tell you, I am totally gonna tell you.
Beyond my
I stopped
expectations
myself.
of a
I
finance
stopped
director.
myself. Stopped myself. I realized how silly it was, but thank you for emphasizing it. Okay, so I'm looking at the, I'll wait for you.
I have so many files open. Okay, it is on page 14 of the capital improvement
Would you mind
plan.
looking at page 32?
Yes. That's your statement. Okay, that is your statement of non-utility CIP sources, uses, and cash balance.
So my question is, when I look at that opening balance at the top left under 20,100,000,
Yes,
does that number include the REIT fund balance?
it does not.
That's what I thought.
Below, you'll see in the
To know about.
fourth, sixth line down, REIT is a source. It has its own line, and that is
It's a revenue source.
the
No,
revenue
but
source.
that's not the fund balance. That's the
Correct.
collections, the new REIT collections expected for the year.
That's correct.
So the fund balance, the opening fund balance, which is several million, I'm wondering, where is that?
For the capital?
No,
Or
no,
for the
just-
REIT?
I'm wondering, I believe that that's not on this page at all.
Can we put it up on the screen?
Sure.
You can't see that from over there?
We're blind as we speak.
Well, and I
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, I can, well, you can, Mike. You're remote with me. We're working on the sound issues.
I can hear you loud and clear too, Deb.
Yeah, it's everybody in the council chambers we can't hear.
Testing.
We can hear you.
Okay, good, thank you. All right. Sorry for the interruption. They can hear us.
All right, so the sheet that's on screen now is the 2022, so this is back to the budget, that snapshot. So the real estate excise tax fund started with a $2.7 million beginning fund balance. This is 21 and 22 sources. Here's the transfer out in to the capital funds. And the ending fund balance for REIT is estimated at a little over $2 million.
So that 2 million is the 2 million I'm trying to question, because I don't think that's in the CIP, page 32 there. So therefore, I'm thinking there's another 2 million that is available to the CIP.
And potentially other things.
Well, we're saying REIT goes to CIP. I remember REIT's pretty heavily restricted by state law anyway.
So, yeah, and debt obligation was taken out before the ending fund balance, so yes, according to that, then it's counted.
So here is page 14 of the CIP, and this is REIT cash flow, and this amount right here is the likely ending. I mean, we've collected a lot of REIT, and so this is the verification that we need to do from this original budget.
Yeah, how did we get from 2 million to 10 million? That doesn't,
That's
that's
what
not possible.
That's what I want to verify.
Yeah, we better check those numbers.
Absolutely.
That's just, there's no way REIT would have ever generated that kind of money.
Yeah. That will be verified.
Okay, so why don't we leave that with you? Check back on that part of the CIP. But then as you think about it, also think about whether that 2 million or whatever the number is shouldn't be brought onto page 32 as part of opening fund balance.
That will be verified.
Okay.
I do want to, I do believe then that either we change reserves or we take out this
Yeah, we
last
take out
line.
that whole sentence.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay. All right.
Look at that, Mayor. We're working on CIP as well.
I know, this is like a bonus night.
If we still had no parkway, we may have been holding those funds.
Yeah, but that's not what we're doing.
Yeah. I'm just saying, we should plan versus assume that the ending fund balance automatically goes to capital.
Well, so the point here is, the reason we're kind of messing around with this is to try and figure out what our policy will be. So what we're talking about ending up here with in 2.4.2 is what you see there, except not the last sentence.
So the policy statement is essentially saying is that REIT sources go to capital improvement projects as well as
Debt
if there's
service.
debt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Any other discussion on 2.4.2? You okay with moving on? Yeah, we can wait.
Wait, all right, so I'm gonna,
Take your time.
no, because I'm gonna, if you take it out, is the assumption the opposite then that, and I disagree with the use of reserves here, but that REIT fund balances should be, at the end of the year, we should take it, we should zero it out and move it to CIP.
In essence, it's silent on that point. If we take that last sentence out, then it's what all it says is REIT funds should be used towards these two purposes, and that's all it says. It doesn't really speak to as a policy. What's that?
Oh, no,
So it doesn't really establish a policy as should it all be spent current year, should it all be transferred current year, should it not? It's just silent on that question. So if we want to not be silent, then let's say what we want. So I would just say for future, if you think of possible things that could happen in the future, one possible thing is a revenue bond that maybe is backed by certain revenues. Now, I don't actually, I'm hesitant. Is REIT legally restricted and can't be used for, I don't know if that's true. Anyway, the point is possibly, maybe this, I'll see if the city attorney's still on, maybe he'll comment, but if the REIT, I could imagine someone saying, hey, let's use some or all of the REIT as pledged against a bond. So, since there's different ways that you might use it to obtain, to hit this objective of capital or debt service, I would say just leave it at that and let each council decide whether they want to leave any fund balance there or not.
because you may look to do a larger improvement project and use REIT as a source of funds. So essentially, it's still, even though you issue debt for it, you use REIT in order to pay the debt service.
Right. So it just leaves that, by not specifying the fund balance one way or the other. We've said how it should be used, and then we just stop there and leave the flexibility. Oh, you were waiting for me to say that word, weren't you? Flexibility.
Yeah,
You're
good.
getting there, you're
We'll go
catching on.
might be nice
All
to
right.
state something, but I'm okay.
Okay, so let's move to 2.4.4. So here's my comment on 2.4.4. I think we should completely eliminate this. This has never made any sense to me. It comes out of the dark recesses of Snoqualmie's past. The notion that we think about it, human services. We're taking money that's available for that the council's making available for human services, and then we're not spending it. It doesn't make any sense to me. I have no idea why we would need this reserve. In fact, the very notion of the reserves that we talked about earlier in general fund imagines that, that would be used to fund this kind of need.
In the current policies packet, there's actually, I believe, 10 pages of this. It was a resolution, a separate resolution that was passed, and then it was updated, and it is, there's tons of procedures. And when we first started talking about policy, When you shared very quickly about the human services, that was the, the attempt to, let's bring it down to a paragraph, but, I agree, it's a, it's a line item in the governmental, general fund budget. There's we'll set up those same procedures in order for folks to request assistance or funds or what have you. But taking this out is something that we would gladly.
Yeah. Just
gladly
it's
do.
just another fund that they're having to do accounting for that just isn't needed anymore. It doesn't serve a purpose.
Well, so wait, so I think that we got in a bind that yes, at the beginning of the year, we try to allocate all the money we can out of here.
No, we don't. That's the problem.
We try. And we ran into situations where we at least earmarked the allocation and had a need come up later on in the year. And we had already earmarked all of the human services funds. So we didn't have anything left. That's why we said maintain, that's why it's the 50,000. It's maintain a little bit just in case you have an unexpected need come up.
Except that we haven't run it that way for many, many years. That's how we run the hotel tax. But so the Human Services Fund, just to be clear, has no dedicated source of funding. The only
Correct.
source it has is the
Transfers.
appropriation the appropriation we give out of the general fund. So the point would be just appropriate out of the general fund that which you wish to spend on human services and spend it just like any other expenditure out of the general fund. There's no need for a special fund here. There's no separate revenue source going in. There's no need for a separate fund balance. It serves no purpose.
Okay, then what you say in the condition where we run into a late year need, it would come out of the general fund contingency.
Correct.
Okay.
Maybe a budget amendment.
Huh?
If it's a larger request, it's a budget amendment, but that's brought before the council, an agenda bill, and the council deliberates on whether or not you want to fulfill that request.
So the difference with the hotel motel tax is that's a different deal where it does have a dedicated revenue source. So that you've got to think about, okay, well, that comes into its own fund, and then how much we want to allocate. All of those issues exist for that fund. They just don't exist for human services fund, so there's no need to treat it that way.
Okay, I'm okay if it's part of contingency. I just, if monkeypox becomes a thing, we may need to go into contingency fund somewhere to do something to address it.
Yeah, but we've got a contingency
We've
fund
got a
for that.
contingency fund if we're just moving this to there, fine.
Councilor Christensen, you're okay with that?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, ready for 2.5? If it's all right, I'd like to take a 5-minute recess if there's no objection. All right, we'll take a 5-minute recess and come back at 7:35. Ms. Ferguson, I'll wait till you're set and then I have a question for you.
I'm not sure if this is. Well, it's not showing that it's charging, so.
T to the rescue.
There's a green light on, so it must be working.
Oh, there. Yeah, we're all set. Thank you.
So there's one other special revenue fund that operates currently in a similar way to the Human Services Fund that isn't mentioned here. And so I just wanted to bring it up. If it's something you plan to address later, that's probably okay. Which is there's a, I'm not going to remember the exact number. Oh, you could probably look it up on that sheet, but I think it's 141 or 142. It's called something like Community Development Fund.
Yes. It is.
I think we treat it as a special revenue fund, even though it doesn't actually have any special revenues.
We do. I'm glad you brought that up. I recommend we not treat that as a special revenue fund and move it into the general fund.
That, I was going to say the same thing.
Okay, thank you.
I think that we have been treating it now for at least, for I think 4 years now, we've been treating it that way. We've just never actually done away with the fund itself. And I think possibly the reason was we weren't sure where the policy that established it was. I think, I'm not sure that's true. But in any event, I don't see a policy creating that fund here. So therefore, I think by being silent on it, it just makes it go away. But wanted to check if that was your view.
That is my view, and why it's not included to specifically kind of call out those special revenue funds. One of the, and this is in code, this is in, that kind of identifies the.
No, go ahead and finish, yeah.
The
City attorney has comments for us once you're done.
Okay, so it identifies the duties, that the finance director or the treasurer, that my position essentially is to establish funds. And the way that I do that is through the budget. And so I'm always looking to have the minimum number of funds. If it were required by law to have a fund, we'll have a separate fund. But for a special fund for community development, in some cases, street operating has in some cases, some municipalities will separate that out. It's heavily subsidized by the general fund. So why not it be a department or a line item in the general fund versus separating out? We can track it with good financial information systems, and it is just, it's one of those cleaning up of the number of funds that we use.
So we'll see what city attorney has to say on this, but I would just say my understanding of the historical reason that fund was there is that there was a time early on in the Ridge development for the city where in fact, they were having all these new community development costs coming in, and they wanted to make sure that that they in essence paid for themselves, that the developer fees would pay for those. Those days are long gone now. Fees that come into community development pay for a small fraction of the actual cost. So just like that sort of need or use, I believe, is long in the past. And so therefore there's just no purpose served anymore by this. But city attorney, do you have something for us on this?
You just touched on it, Mr. Chair, and that is, in addition to what you said about making sure that things paid for themselves, I believe that there were also limitations in some of the early development agreements about the uses to which certain fees or charged to the developer could be put, and having a separate fund like that would enable, at the time, I think, the city to track it. There's also a limitation in state law on the amount that can be charged for building and permitting fees. Financial tracking. A separate fund would facilitate that tracking. And then I know Councilmember Holloway will probably remember protests by a certain property owner in the Ridge over the amount that they were charged, and particularly how much they were charged for outside engineering fees. And there was an audit done and a complaint and so on. So I can't speak to the specifics of this fund, only to point out those things that were swirling around the development of the Ridge that may have made a separate fund make more sense at the time from a
So
legal standpoint.
could I just ask, when I make the statement, I believe that there's no longer any reason to do that today. Do you disagree with that statement?
No,
or-
I don't disagree. I was just trying to provide an additional historical / legal background.
No, it's very helpful. Thank you.
But, okay, but part of that was for those community development planning services that are billable, we were unsure, and the existing finance system really could not tell us whether or not they were funding themselves. Okay, so so that question is still there, is our community development billable services That's not the full department, it's just billable services. Are they funding themselves? Are our rates correct? If we can answer that question without the use of a special fund like this, then yeah, let's get rid of it. Or we make the decision that it doesn't have to be self-sufficient. We're going to subsidize that kind of activity because it's in the best interest of the city.
So 2 points. The first is the use of this fund doesn't answer that question because all community development costs go in there, not just the billable ones. So we're not using it in a way that would actually facilitate the answer to that question. So,
Please, but we couldn't even figure out what the department costs were.
Right, okay.
Springbrook was not helpful.
So as far as the question that Councilmember Holloway is asking, which is if we wanted to know the billable costs and the, I'm not using very good terminology, let me try and do better. The costs that we incur in support of, I'll use the term new construction, new building, and the fees that we generate from those, such as application fees and whatever the various fees are that developers pay in those situations. If we wanted to know whether those fees are covering those particular costs, first off, this fund, just looking at this fund wouldn't tell us that at all. There's way more stuff in there. But is that a question that we can get an answer to?
I think we can get an answer to that. I mean, it would take some work, but there's also another term I want to infuse in here is that accounts. So there's a difference between, and oftentimes in developer agreements or especially in bond covenants, you'll see the word account. So some interpret that as a separate fund set aside for that. What we'll do is bring the community development line items in accounts into the general fund, match those with revenues that we collect, match the expenditure, and then be able to report, separately on whether or not the revenues are covering those particular expenses. So it's just a matter of us setting up the new financial information system, the Munis system, with separate accounts. We'll have a lot more ability to project account, job cost, and some of those terms obviously don't fit with this, but when we can assign some special codes to track, then we'll do that through accounts versus a fund.
Okay, so that sounds fantastic. But to Councilmember Holloway's question then, the ability to do what you just described is not dependent on continuing with a separate community development fund. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I come at it a different way. One, our existing accounting system, I won't mention company name. You would have to go in and tag all those expenses and revenues according to which department, whatever, in order to do that analysis. And that's just, with the whole thing, that's just not feasible. Okay, so the thought was cut it down to just the department and then at least we have a chance. Well, even that has proven to be unfeasible. So I wouldn't spend any more time or money trying to do it with the existing finance system. I would wait for the ERP system, and hopefully at that stage we are marking the expenses and revenues according to department and services, as you were talking the account numbers, and we can track it that way. So I get rid of it for now.
Yeah. That's fine.
All right. Sounds like, Ms. Ferguson, you're in favor of that as well.
I'm in favor of that.
So then let's just think about, we're here to set policies. So we don't have a policy here creating or requiring either that fund or a fund balance in it, or a reserve in it, any of those things. But I guess the question I have is, there some policy out there? So you guys went through, you guys had to go herd up all the cats that were all over the place and try and put it into one policy. Is it possible that we've got a stray cat out there that we need to go find and get, so that we can, is there possibly a policy out there that established that fund that we need to go find so we can shut it down?
We'll do some research to try to find that, but as far as I know, I wasn't able to locate if there was a action of the council, a policy, separate policy developed, but, we will want to make sure that there isn't a stray out there and then bring that before the council, because if it is in a separate policy, what you'll see when we get to you're ready to adopt financial policy, the ordinance is going to be proposed that it basically replaces any and all, and we want to list those. So we'll work to make sure that we do find those if they exist.
All right, so we'll leave that one with you then.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Internal 2.5, internal service funds. I think we're there. Any comments on 2.5? So there's a, let's see, what is that? In the first paragraph, the last two sentences, I think, don't make sense to me why we would have that, and I would think we would just remove those two sentences. I don't think that's what we're doing, but I don't think we need to, I just don't think those two sentences are needed.
Yeah, there is no policy, there is no target with regards to internal service funds. So this was, in the proposed policy does the council want to set a reserve? We do not need to have a reserve just because the nature of internal service funds. And so that is, perfectly fine to remove that if the council is comfortable with not setting a reserve or a fund balance target in those types of funds.
So the concept, just to share what I'm thinking, is internal service funds. So this pays for, I think we have 4 of them, possibly 5. We pay for insurance, for example, through that. We pay for vehicles replacements, equipment replacement. So we've got 4 or 5 of those. The thing that's true, what's that?
I think maintenance as well, correct?
There's now, I believe, a building maintenance fund in there. The thing to know about these funds is that they are the source of those funds is entirely by charging the operating budgets of other departments. So when you think about the operating fund, if I'm the Parks and Public Works Department, and I get, my budget starts out, even before I've paid one person, my budget starts out with a charge each year for those different things, for insurance, for replacement of my vehicles, for maintenance of my buildings. So if we build a fund balance in those funds, that means we're charging the current operating fund for something that we're actually not going to spend. We're just going to sort of sock it away. And so my point of view is, let's not do that. Let's charge them for that which we're actually spending. And to the extent we need to sock something away, well, we've done that. We've set up a contingency reserve. So there's no need to have additional reserves in these funds. Ms. Ferguson, do you have any different point of view to that?
Well, I would want to ask, though, about in these types of funds, the ER&R, facilities maintenance funds, and information technology, these types of funds are where that charge, that cost allocation charge, includes a portion for that future replacement. So these funds do have, an ending fund balance. Right? So.
But not a reserve.
Not a reserve. So what I would endeavor to ensure that we have is, and we're going to be going through this effort, is to enhance or update those, the ER&R fund, those maintenance plans, maintenance replacement and plans. And so we need to know that we've got fund balance there because those charges are coming in and we're saving. And so it is set aside, but it is not reserve.
Exactly. You must have the fund balance for exactly the reasons you said, so in particular, the IT, the ER&R,
Yes.
very likely the equipment. The one I would ask you to look at, well, it sounds like you're going to look at all of them. Fantastic. We've been asking for that relook for a little while, so it's due, so that's fantastic. The one you might look at is, well, the two, I believe we have I want to call it, I don't know if it's, I always think of it as the copier fund, but it's like supplies, office supplies, something like that. And then I think there's one for insurance. And the thing that has not made sense to me in the past is that we carry fund balances in those two, and I've never understood why that would be needed. So I could understand a fund balance in the middle of a biennium year to year, but going out of a biennium with a fund balance in those hasn't in the past made sense to me. But I think the question tonight is, do we have a reserve policy for those? My point of view would be no. Of course, we'll have fund balance, and your relook that you're talking about will then come back with a recommendation as to what those fund balances should be. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's called a risk management fund, so that's the.
Oh,
that's
thank
for-
you.
And then there's called a shared services fund. And Mr. Boutte and I were just talking about those two funds that we were going to take a look at those. The shared services is one where we have kind of janitorial, we have the audit, so my thoughts on that is that it's something that from an audit, we pay professional services for the auditors to come in, and that's cost allocated. Finance, we cost allocate finance out to the direct service departments for providing payroll, for, providing accounts payable. So it just doesn't make sense to have, and really there's less than 100,000.
It's not a big number, I know.
Right, so it really needs to be pulled back into the general fund and properly allocated out.
That's been my point of view as well. So then, with that in mind, we'll wait to hear on those fund balances during the operating fund, as we go
Yes.
through the budget. But with regard to this question, which is, do we need reserves there? Are you comfortable with us just taking out that notion? We won't have a reserve in those funds. It's not needed.
I am very comfortable with that.
It's the key point being here, any reserves needed for those purposes are covered by the general fund reserve that we talked about earlier this evening.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, this puts a 30% premium on the services, and no, take it out.
Okay. All right, so I think it's just the last two sentences of the first paragraph. If you take those out, I think that removes the concept. On any other comments on 2.5?
You don't get rid of the whole paragraph?
She's got a point. You got
She
rid
does
of
have
it.
a point.
You got rid of it.
Let's just kill off 2.5 entirely.
Right. Okay.
All right, 2.6. Any comments on 2.6? The comment I have on 2.6 is it says that if we fall below target thresholds, that we should regain it during the next budget cycle. And I think that we ought not to be that restrictive. For example, I know it's a different, no, it would apply. So we talked earlier about, what if we didn't have the reserve balance in the enterprise funds that we wanted? What would be the period over which we would build that up? It turns out we did have that balance there, but if we didn't, would we necessarily say, okay, well, that needs to go into the next biennium? I think we should not be that restrictive. I think, so if we just strike out the words during the next budget cycle, we've left the concept, well, we need to regain the minimum threshold, but we haven't been so restrictive saying in the next biennium. We've left that to judgment of future councils. We've just put the goal out there.
So you're just saying take out the
During the next budget cycle.
Say forecast timing of the, okay. And first sentence, I agree with you.
Okay,
We don't, I'm struggling at the first sentence. Should assign fund balances, you can strike targets because we don't have fund balance targets, fall below reserve target thresholds. The city will strive. Again, I'm doing that distinction.
Yep.
Reserves and fund balances are related, but two different things.
yes.
And I would recommend that that it might read, should assign ending fund balances and/or reserve targets fall below thresholds. That way, either one, if it's an ending fund balance where we need to improve it, or if it's a reserve target and it needs to be replenished, then it's a blanket statement for either of those.
But I don't think we have anywhere where we've established fund balance targets. We've only established reserve targets.
In the general fund, they're combined. If you recall, it's ending fund balance and reserve, it's combined.
But I thought we said we were going to move it into a separate fund.
Well, we are, but the target is that range, 15 to 20%. So we didn't set a separate fund balance target. We have a combined 15 to 20% range for both.
No, we said 15 to 20% for the reserve target.
And no target for the ending fund balance.
Correct.
Yeah. Any excess and the reserves is the ending fund balance. So in essence, you do have that in there, but it's the 16.5% is on the reserves. That's why I did at any time or ending fund balances fall below our reserve targets, we need to react and get that money back in there.
Yes, we did take it out, reserve fund level.
Okay, super.
All right.
Super.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
No problem.
And so just in 2.7, similar to what
Yeah.
the comment I made above, in the second to the last line in bold, it said, should be determined by the city council. I would just strike the words from there to the end of the sentence.
Would you repeat that again, please?
So the last sentence under 2.7,
Yes.
where the words city council appear, strike everything after city council. Again, just trying to take out that specificity that it must be the next budget cycle.
And are you good with the word should?
I am.
Okay.
I'm not making
Yep,
any
we're all fine with
should-may
that.
decisions anymore tonight.
Councilmember Holloway, for the record, would like to say can.
Must.
Wait. That's the end of the reserve section. That can't be right.
It is. If it's reserves, check. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I see. It's over here. Okay, let's move into 3.0, which is revenues. Any comments on 3.1? I would just make the comment that I think the first two sentences should be omitted. I don't think they're helpful. And I'm not even sure I think they're true. I think we just go in and say here, the following are the objectives. I don't think we need a preamble or an explanation. I mean, the first sentence is true, I guess. I don't know that I don't know.
I don't know that we do the last half of we do maintain a diversified and stable revenue sources.
Well, that's a statement of opinion though, isn't it?
It's saving a
compared
pivot, but I
to-
would also put that our revenue sources induce the instability that we're talking about. When the state only pays you twice a year,
Well, there's only so much we can do with taxes. I mean, so how could we, like, it sort of seems to set up a concept that we have some ability here to control in a way that I just don't think we do. We kind of do the best with what we've got. We don't have enough latitude to have an objective to preserve the city's ability to grow and expand. In fact, the other thing is there's a whole bunch of residents that might not even agree with that. So I think it's unnecessary to have it there, and it's potentially confusing and or controversial. And it's not going to change. It doesn't really change what our policies can be. So maybe just omit it.
well, and also growth and expansion is not the requirement. It's
Right.
maintaining
Maintain
service.
services. Right.
That's fine.
So the suggestion is to omit the first two sentences, and so we would go right into the following our revenue objectives.
Correct.
Okay?
All right. Any comments on 3.1.1?
So, is this applied to enterprise or to general fund only?
Well, it's
both.
essentially all revenues. There is a particular 3.1.5 is revenue that's self-supporting, refers more to the enterprise funds.
Okay, I'm just, the last part of 3.11. Full cost recovery should not be implemented if the fees prevent an individual from obtaining essential service or result. So I'm struggling, does that include, so for water? I mean, we're gonna figure out the rate based on the expenses and what we perceive. So we set the rates, we don't base it on any individuals, we just say so many households and whatever. But we do have a mechanism under which we can do a person in need rate at a lower level. So is that meant to include this? I'm concerned that it doesn't, it just says, pick the person who can pay least for that rate service and that'll be your rate. And that's not how we do it. It's what I could be told to go away and I'm just over analyzing.
If I could just make the suggestion that I think all of 3.1.1 should just go away. Point being, the first sentence is just not true. Taxes are not based on an objective of recovering a stated percentage of a given program's expenses.
Not anymore.
I mean, property taxes are that's just not true. The fees that we charge for most things we charge fees for do not cover the costs. Like, this just isn't the way we operate. So I think this is just not applicable to us, or certainly not applicable to the way we currently operate. So if we leave this in, I think the minute we bring forward the operating budget, we're going to look and say, wait a minute, that's not in accordance with 3.1.1. So I think let's just omit 3.1.1. I don't think it's helping us.
If you want to omit it, I think that's fine. The goal with this particular statement is, and this is other communities have wanted, you can decide, do you want full cost recovery? You want a partial cost recovery? So instead of, we could change out the word full cost recovery to a partial. So that essentially would be a policy statement, stating that you are not looking for full cost recovery when you establish your revenues or your fees, and it mostly pertains to establishing fees because you're right, taxes you're limited. So that's just my thought on, if you leave a policy statement in, you can certainly change the word from full to partially.
So I think you bring up an enormously important point on what is our policy with various fees. This is something that we've kind of been talking about for years now. There's been, and I don't want to speak for the mayor, but I believe that she also has been asking for a updated fee study. This is something that we've all been kind of looking to have done. We know that our fees, or we believe that our fees have lost the relationship to the costs, the related costs that they might have had years ago. And regardless of whether they have or not, it's just time for a relook at all our fees. And so I think we're all supportive of that. Now, once we sort of look at them and understand, okay, here's the fees that we generate for X, I'll just pick for a minute on parks. Here's the fees we charge for people's use of parks, but here's the cost that we spend on parks. So whether we would want to say that those fees should somehow relate to the costs, or whether we think the fees should actually more relate to affordability or fees charged by others in the area, like there's any number of ways we might end up deciding that. And so I just think, since our current practice is far from what's written here, I think it's premature to say what we would choose as the policies. I'm hopeful that as we go through that rate study and sort of then think about the implications, we'll end up making some policy decisions, but they're not in place right now. So I don't think we can state them as a policy right now, because we're not even sure for some of these fees what the relationship is between cost recovery and the fees themselves.
Well, I will encourage you to establish that policy. If you take a look at section 3.2, and this is where when the council establishes new policy, that is then the administration's then, that's our green light then to ensure that we're complying with policy. So fee schedule is a separate section in here, so we have that on our work plan. And yes, we want to do that. What I would recommend then is, and because we would go and take a look at that fee schedule based on these revenue objectives. So I hear you when you're saying we don't know what those objectives might mean. I do recommend that we have some objectives in order for us to start with. If when we're going through that fee schedule update, where we would want to come back then and revise the revenue policy objectives, because the council says that's not what we intended the fee schedule update showed us. It's kind of like the forecast before its time. So perhaps we can shrink down the policy statements. For like an example, 3.1.1, partial recovery. If that's how we go about looking at the fee schedule and bring the council scenarios of this is a fee for partial fee recovery, or wait a minute, the council may want to look at full cost recovery for a certain service or for a certain program. So something for us to start with, and then we can do a policy update again, because this is, I know, one of your favorites. That, once we've kind of gotten into the weeds of the actual administrative work, developing what that fee schedule looks like. So that's what I'm recommending, is that let's skim it down so we have something to start from, and then enhance it.
Did you want to make a comment?
Well, so I guess I'm uncomfortable with the blanket statement. Case in point, community development, we wouldn't go full recovery because we would stop a lot of activities that want to happen in the city. If you look also at between irrigation and water, we intentionally, I think it was irrigation, Bob may correct me, we intentionally drove the irrigation rate lower than recovery because we want them to use that irrigation water before they turn on the potable water to water their plants or trees outside. Okay, if they have that option. So we tried to drive a behavior by the rates. Okay, so the consideration of full or partial is almost at a rate, individual rate level versus a blanket statement across the board that says full or partial recovery. Now, how you write that up in here, maybe you look at that, but it's got to be at the rate level, at that service level that we make that decision.
Can I suggest, if I understood you correctly, what the thought that formed in my mind is, rather than the particular language that's here right now, that what I thought I heard you saying is, can we set up some revenue categories? We don't know which ones are going to go in there, but you're saying as a policy matter, it would be helpful to set up categories that then could be referred to as we do those future rate studies and decide where to set them. So we could, for example, set up a partial cost recovery category and explain how that would work. We could set up a full cost recovery category and just find how that would work. Was I right in understanding that that's really what you're trying to get into the policy, is some concepts that then would be referred to as people then try to evaluate specific situations?
Yes, it is. So if we look at 3.1.1, and this is something that I'm trying to, kind of give a revised version of this, is where the objective of recovering a stated percentage of a given program expenses based on council defined categories. Okay.
Yeah, something like, and you could say some fees will be based on, and then everything you just said. So I think that might be very helpful, and I think is what you're actually trying to achieve here. And if so, maybe take a relook at the wording and with that in mind.
And I think right now, taking out the word in the last sentence, full cost recovery, it could just be cost recovery. And then if the council wishes to further define, then once we have those categories and we have those percentages, then that gets
Sure.
updated there. Okay.
The one thing I would take out is this, there's a reference to why you might move away from full cost recovery. That's not the only reason, the one that's lifted. There may be any number of policy reasons why you might do that. So let's not specify what the reason would need to be. So I would just be silent on that. I would just say, this is a kind of cost recovery. Here's another kind of, or sorry, this is a type of revenue. Here's another type of revenue. And so you lay out these categories, and at this point, leave it at that. And then we'll look to apply those as we go through the rate study and so forth.
Yes.
Does that sound right to you?
Yeah.
Sound right to you, Councilmember Christensen? Okay. So maybe we leave 3.1, 3.12, 3.13, 3. All the 3.1s, maybe just let you go relook at all the 3.1s.
Yes.
Would that be okay?
That would give me some time to, in hearing that we want to have something, but we want to leave it for fee schedule update and help us to define better. Yeah, thank you.
One thing I'd mention in 3.1.5.1, there's a wording, utility rate studies will be conducted every 5 years. I would say, actually, I think we're doing them more frequent, but I could imagine times when I would not specify the time period. I would say something like, will be conducted periodically, something like that. Leave that a little more flexible.
Okay. Okay.
If, for example, something were to suddenly change, a big part of our city changed, we might want to do a rate study upon that occurrence. Okay, so 3.2 you explained to us. Any comments on 3.2? I would just say the last sentence is kind of like saying, if you're thirsty, you could have a drink of water. It's sort of unnecessary because it goes without saying. But if you think it's important, I find it objectionable. It just seems unnecessary.
Just on the periodic basis, the fee schedule, blah, 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 that.
If you want to leave it in, I don't object.
We'll take that sentence out. The last sentence.
No, I keep it in.
You keep it in?
Mhm.
I think we're fine with leaving it in.
Okay.
Anyway.
It's like when people ask me, can I ask you a question? And I say, you just did.
You got a minute?
Yeah.
That's it. 1 minute is all you get. It never is.
Used your minute.
Yeah.
What's better is when they say, do you have a second? It's too late. Okay, 3.3. Okay, 3.4. I have two questions on 3.4. My first question is, it refers to something called financial procedures, and I don't know, I'm uncomfortable adopting a council policy that refers to something that I don't know what it is. Is that a thing that's also passed by the council?
No, financial procedures are essentially the guidelines and the procedures where I call it finance sets the table on the procedures that we need to have in place, and they're administrative. So it's something that we establish in order to comply with policy. And so you see financial procedures here, as per financial procedures, that is a manual, a guidebook for the departments to follow the rules, so to speak.
Fantastic, excellent. I would just point this out. You don't need council's approval to do that. I
agree.
And so I would not create the appearance that you needed council's approval by having us say this. I would just, you have the authority to do that. You should proceed to do that, I think. Sometimes council, when you give us something to look at, we'll conclude that, we should weigh in, when the reality is this is not our domain.
I'm fine with taking it out. I would appreciate it. Some place in the policy is to recognize that financial procedures need to be created. So yes, from an authority standpoint, it sets the stage. So if there is a place in here that I can recommend that, where it's maybe it's in the introduction and I think it refers to that, then I'm fine with taking that out. But I do feel that there needs to be some reference that council is expecting us to set procedures for us to manage internal control and to ensure that the departments are helping us to comply with policy.
I think that sounds great. Just be careful on your wording, because we should not infringe on authority the mayor already has. So the implication that she needs our approval to do something that she doesn't need our approval to do, I would never want that implication to be there. On the other hand, I think what you're more saying is ask the council, and furthermore, it is not our place to instruct the mayor on how to administer staff. That is not our place. That's within her prerogative, So what I would say is, if you want to have us acknowledge that those policies exist and endorse that, endorse that they exist, something like that, so we're not infringing, nor are we attempting to instruct in an area that is inappropriate for us to instruct on, then I'd say, yeah, I think that's fine. So maybe find a place to put that. I think that's great.
Okay, we'll do that.
Then more broadly on 3.4, my question would be, and this gets to this question that comes up because of the discussion we just had, which is, there are policies that the council simply doesn't need to have because they would appropriately be administrative policies. So my question would be, do we need 3.4 at all? Or is that just really in the purview of administration that we just don't need to say this? You already have that authority.
There's a lot of procedure in bad debt. But what we want to make sure is that, and this is where our authority then to allow for refunds and discounts is aligned with the mayor. However, in some municipalities, that authority is set in code. And so it's, the council has established that. So we do not need this if the council is not interested in this level of control. So this is a controlling statement. If the council is okay, then we can take that out, and we would follow, any state law,
Yeah,
obviously.
I'd be in favor of taking it out
Okay.
if you need us to authorize something. So as part of a policy, if there's something that only the council can authorize, then bring that to us and ask us to put it in that, but then you'd be, the council authorizes blah, blah, blah. And the reason we'd be doing that is because actually mayor doesn't have that authority and we do, so we need to give that. So bring that to us, of course, but absent that, I'd say, let's not have us in policies that we don't need to be in. We're a much bigger city than we were 20 years ago. And so, some of those policies that you might see in involvement by city council in a smaller city, we don't need to do that here.
Okay. So then do we have our own internal policy? I know we have procedures. We do need a policy.
Well, that's the procedures. So we do not have the procedures or the internal policy in order to do that. That's what we are working on in those financial procedures.
Right. So what would be state law then? You said bad debt and collections, what would be the state law to follow?
City code. There's city code that refers to discounts or who has the authority for approving discounts.
Okay.
In 3.4, the last reference is to city code.
Right.
And so sometimes state law guides or sometimes city code.
Is that okay?
Well, in federal parlance, there's laws and regulations, and the regulations are promulgated, if I got that term right. Bob, you can correct me, I probably butchered that term. It's been a while since my civics class. But are never voted on by the Congress or Senate. Okay, so your procedures, as you said, should be going to, in compliance with how to carry out city code or state statute. And then, but they're yours. The only time we get into if there's appearance of conflict. So I'm not sure this even needs to be in here.
We'll remove it.
For 3.5, honestly, 3.5 confused me. And then I stepped back and said, why do we need 3.5 at all? What is this doing? I didn't discern a policy statement. I just didn't understand is this needed? Is 3.5 needed?
Well, the reason that it is proposed here is and it really, I think something needs to be included here. However, during every budget development cycle, the council is going to set the revenue targets for sales tax. It's going to, if the council wishes to, so here's an example. If sales tax is recorded, received in the general fund, And then there is a dollar amount that the council budgets to transfer to a capital project fund or transfer to another fund for another purpose, then that is the reason for this policy statement as to where do we put sales tax revenue. Now, in some communities, there's 10% of sales tax receipts that go into pick a fund, or in this case, we have the non-reoccurring sales tax all going for capital improvements. So this policy statement, and you don't need it if you don't want it in there, but it is a way to ask the council, do you want, where do you want sales tax to be essentially tracked? Because in some cases, it's difficult when we're looking at sales tax in its entirety, historical, and we've got 10% that's going into one fund. So it's a way for the council to define and help the administration track this important source. So that's the
So I
purpose of
understood
it.
what you just said, and that's great. I don't think these words say what you just said. So if you could make these words say what you just said, then I'd be fine with it.
Okay.
I understood what you said. I just didn't understand what these words don't, to me, say what you just said. So, yeah.
In the red, there's the red font here, which is essentially where I needed council to say, is this the statement that you want to put into policy? Is that the city council will determine the amount of sales tax source to be distributed from the general fund to other funds. So that's really the important piece of the whole paragraph.
So let me ask it this way. Yeah, that makes sense to me. That's the part I could make the most sense out of that sentence. But my question after that was, and if this sentence isn't here, then what? Well, then we do that anyway. So like, I wasn't sure what changes because this 3.5 is here.
It sets your wishes in, it memorializes your wishes, because it's not written policy. So if the council wants to have it, to include it as written policy, it helps. If you don't, then we're going to continue on for every budget cycle, we're going to continue to propose sales tax revenue in the general fund. We're going to, propose an amount in the capital fund, and the council would set the budget, and, we're off to the biennial.
But the council could distribute, say this correctly, the council can distribute revenue funds at its discretion as long as it is compliant with any restrictions on that revenue fund to anywhere they want. Not just taxes, not just sales tax, but any of our revenue sources. Why a specific paragraph on sales tax?
It's a major source. So you often see it in policy to specifically talk about your major sources, and that's why here. But it is true that is the council's budget setting powers, authority.
Maybe
So
you're
it doesn't need to, like I said, it doesn't need to be in there, but because it is a major source, do you want to set it in stone right now in that we would receive sales tax in the general fund, and then you decide where the sales tax goes?
So what you're saying is, or maybe what I'm hearing you say is, so we have this policy that sales tax from construction goes to capital, all other sales tax goes to the general fund. Are you saying we should say that in this policy? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, can we change the words just to say that then?
Sure. Yeah.
I'm okay, that is a policy statement.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other one is, why is there error? Again,
This is
the council can
policy
distribute
statements. Yeah.
revenue funds as they see fit, as long as they are in compliance with any restrictions on those funds. That goes for all of them.
So there's no need to just say that.
No need to say that, yeah.
But there is a need to say, oh, construction sales tax goes to capital, because that wouldn't otherwise
Yeah.
you know, that's a policy statement that this council has adopted. So let's memorialize it in the policy, right?
Yes. Thank you.
So similarly, 3.6 seemed to be a sort of thing that would go in those administration policies, not need to be a council policy?
You know, there is no policy on grant management. So it depends, because, you know, this essentially, it's similar to the sales tax, that
The point I'm making
it's
is
procedural, yeah.
yeah, well, it appears that we, the council, are reaching into the administration and telling the mayor and the city administrator how to conduct things. I don't think it's appropriate for us to do that. I think that's for the mayor to decide. Now, if this said something like, before you apply for a grant, you have to get council approval, okay, now that's a council policy, but that's not what this says, nor is it our current requirement.
Does the council want to require that administration would bring forward grant opportunities?
Before they're applied for? Not that I know of.
Okay.
I
In
mean,
some-
we've never
in some
said that.
communities- In some communities, they
Sure,
require
they
that.
do, yes.
So if
That's
that-
not been a requirement
they-
here.
okay.
We've never
then we
had
can
that.
take it out.
Yeah.
We absolutely can take this out.
Go get it.
Because I think grants would be tied to our capital improvement, or CIP and other things, right?
Yeah, but I think the council's point of view, I think, is, yes, go pursue grants that you think make sense and don't wait for us, just go do it.
Right.
And nor am I gonna tell you to apply, do it legally. Part of it here is do it legally. It's like, no, you're going to, I trust you. And the other part of having it reviewed by the administrator or mayor, that's not council policy. That's administrative policy. So, yeah. We could have a policy that says, go after every grant you can. But I don't think we need to.
You'll be in constant violation because you'll never find all of them.
Right.
All right, moving on to 3.7.
Yes.
The only question I had in 3.7 is this 50% thing that's being introduced. I think that means it's new. And I wasn't sure why that was helpful. I thought we could just leave that out, but I assume it's being put in for a reason I didn't know what it was.
Well, there are times, I don't know if they're quite so frequent, for capital projects where there is an entity, a person who wants to donate. And oftentimes that leads to, I want to name the facility.
Oh, that's what you're getting at.
And so this is a way to say that, and give guidance, policy guidance to the administration is that, it has to be a substantial gift of at least 50% of the cost, and it's defined specifically on what that means in the points 1, 2, 3. So that is why this section is there. Whether or not that's ever happened in the city, I don't know, but it is often a paragraph such as this to help guide, because if there is no policy, then that's where there could be a donor who wants to direct, guide, expect that their contribution would kind of give them the ability to name, decide, design, but that, I mean, in some cases, in my experience, that significant donor, it's having a policy kind of put some boundaries in place, and certainly there's going to be efforts to hear what those wishes are, but whether or not the council wants to, follow along with those wishes.
So let me ask,
That's
I
right.
follow, I think I follow what you're saying. As this particular wording is proposed, though, wouldn't this say, or would this, I don't mean to ask, it sounded combative the way I was asking it, I didn't mean it to sound like that. Would this require, therefore, that if, imagine a donor, imagine we're doing a significant new monument in the city, and a donor came forward and said, I'm willing to pay 35, 40%. Would this, as this is being proposed, then say, well, that's fine, but you can't have your name on it unless you go up to 50%? And do we want to be that restrictive? Because I can imagine situations where we might say, actually, at 35%, yes, we will name it after you if you'll pay 35% of this. And so I'd be hesitant to have a policy that said, oh, sorry, no, we're gonna have to go through a whole policy, amendment process with a ordinance and all in order to do, like, I wouldn't want to tie our hands like that. So would this serve to tie our hands, in which case can we move this away from more to a guidance rather than a requirement?
We can, and I really like your flexibility versus control mindset tonight, so that is very helpful. So what we can do is, as determined by the city council, or, we do not have to have a specific target in there.
What do you think?
Oh, if they want to donate a quarter of what the city hall costs, that's substantial. But
I would give very serious
50%.
consideration of naming something even at 25% of something that big.
Right.
But that's at, discretion of the council administration.
Right. So this actually happened in another community, and so Pepsi,
No?
so Pepsi wanted to donate a substantial amount to name the ice arena. For those Coca-Cola drinkers, that was problematic. So that was, it was an easy conversation, and so Pepsi stepped up and added more than 50%. So, but again.
Yeah, but sometimes I get that, you sort of encourage them to step up more, but sometimes that's all you're gonna get is 35%, and you wouldn't wanna have them walk, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so you'll take a look at the wording at
Absolutely,
3.7?
yes.
Well, also, but in 3.7, if no terms or conditions are attached to the donation, the administration will prepare a summary of funding sources. I think that if statement ought to be taken out, and just the administration will prepare a summary of funding source and recommended use of the proceeds. That has to take into consideration the restrictions, but I really don't.
So you're saying strike everything in that sentence up to the comma? And
Up
then
to the
just
comma.
And let the rest of the sentence stand,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, can you,
So
Yeah.
strike if no terms or conditions are attached to the donation.
are you in 3.7.1?
I'm in 3.7,
See it.
the last
Oh, I
sentence.
see.
There, okay, thank you. If no terms or conditions, strike that, correct?
Correct. It's just, we ought to, even if it's give you this horse for free, that's usually the gift that keeps on taking. And we should go through that step of understand what it costs to maintain that on an ongoing basis.
Attorney Sturbank, did you want to say something?
No, I'm sorry. My microphone was off mute accidentally. My apologies.
No problem. Okay, looking at 3.7.2.
We lost our air conditioning, so because there's a fan back there.
Ah,
Well, we got the acquisition lights on again for the painting.
so 3.7.2 appears to me to be, again, reaching into the mayor's area of authority, and we ought not to do that.
And that is, that is fine.
We're directing the administration to do something that I don't think it's for us to do that.
That's
You're
just fine.
talking, the administrator will review the donation project with the finance director?
Yeah, we're telling the administration how they should conduct business inside the administration. I don't think that's for us to say. Now, if we
Alright.
want to make a policy, or you have to bring it to the council, or, here's a policy, you can only accept these, that's a different thing. But this just tells them how to procedurally do things, which is, I think, not our place.
It often comes up with benches, naming benches. It seems to be a common project that an entity, a group wants to,
I think we trust the mayor on that one.
yeah.
Well, it would still have to
What
come,
about removal of things? Do you need the approval on removal of things?
I think if the mayor wants to remove a bench, I think she's got that.
We'll talk later.
What's that?
We'll talk later.
Okay. Would you like to see this stay in then, Mayor?
No, this is fine.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
wait, let's back up though. Maybe there is a policy. Is there a dollar figure of a donation that the mayor doesn't have to come to council to accept?
At some point, there's going to be something big with a name on it. So I would think council would have some say
Something big,
Yeah.
yeah.
as to, yes.
But if somebody wants to donate a park bench,
I mean, that type of stuff's fine.
right, and I'm just saying, what's that level under which
Fine.
council, there should be council involvement or there should not be council involvement?
And I think that's in the, I mean, that's.
The first sentence
leaving in that
says all of
substantial
it comes to
financial
us.
gift.
And you're saying we should give her a dollar.
I'm just asking
threshold.
the question.
How often does this come up? Like,
Oh, Dave Needhouse Field.
Well, so I think you need to,
One, we got the railroad thing in discussion.
to define what the substantial financial gift is, I think is what you want to do.
but yeah, and that was kind of why I was wondering, like, how often are we gonna see this? Like, is something that's gonna be coming forward frequently? Are we anticipating? Because that would, I feel like.
I've never
maybe
seen one in 6
alter
years.
the-
I've never seen a single one. So is that,
No, it's because we usually,
is this like an edge case that never happens, or?
so them before they come in.
Well, in the proposed language, this, under the substantial financial gift number 3 is replacement of an existing unnamed facility or landmark, could be a favorite bench, that requires substantial renovation at the time of the gift. So, it could fall under that, policy
Well, we
statement.
did
But
with Dave Needhouse's family.
No, I'm saying the first sentence here, the very first sentence says, every gift comes to us. So what I thought you were saying is, should we allow some, rather than every single one having to come to us, should we allow the mayor to accept some, given I thought you were saying dollar threshold. Councilmember Christensen, I thought you were saying something similar, right?
I was just saying, if we're gonna pick a threshold, we should know like how frequently it comes. But I have not reviewed the RCWs on here. Are there, any part of that have to do with presenting it to city council or not?
That in the gifts?
Yeah.
Oh, the,
3.8 is
That, yeah, just that first sentence on
Yeah.
the point seven,
the
yes.
$50 limit.
Yes.
that-
Yeah.
something.
Sorry?
Yeah, the limit's $50.
Okay.
So are we on to 3.8? Is that what we're doing?
Wait a minute, did you pick that dollar figure out of the air, or is that the actual limit
No,
of
that's
what the mayor can
that's-
accept?
That's my understanding, is that's the state law, is for it. It's
Okay.
it's the standard for state employees. And so most cities just, and I haven't looked at these exact RCW, that's why I was asking, is most cities just by reference adopt the state standard. And the state standard is $50.
So for what it's worth, this does not adopt the state standard. This is more restrictive than the state standard that you just described, which I would question, why do we really want to be more restrictive, or shall we just adopt the state standard?
well, we're talking about gifts to
The city.
city officials. That 3.8.
No, this is
No,
all
so-
donations to the city.
We're still up above, yeah.
3.8 is.
3.7.
Officials.
3.7 is gifts, donations. And then 3.8 is gifts to city officials. So
Right,
it's
but we're back on
two.
3.7.
Okay,
Because we're in this discussion of naming and then the benches. Well, what if someone, gives us, just the idea is, do you guys really have to come to us for a small gift? And then, or should we allow the mayor to accept gifts up to an amount without coming to us? Because as written, it says every single one.
This is substantial gift, financial gift.
Well, that's limiting the naming rights. So that's sort of a unique case.
All donations, you're right.
Do you want to give that a think and come back to us on that?
yeah. So the RCW is referring to the city, code cities exercise any power or perform any of its functions, including purchasing and or participating in the financing of jointly or in cooperation as provided for, and it refers to another chapter. So we'll go back and ensure that this RCW for the substantial gifts that are bequeathed to the city, that's the separate RCW than gifts to city officials. And then it further says is that the legislative body, Code City, shall have power to accept any gift or grant for any public purpose and may carry out any conditions of such gift or grant when not in conflict with state or federal law.
Right, but the discussion point is this first sentence in 3.7 says all donations shall be presented to the city council for approval. That's what it says.
Yes.
Whereas Mr. Sauerwein was pointing out, if we actually just adopted that code section, then in fact, only those over $50 would have to come to us, if I understood him correctly.
No, I was trying to listen to the fan and you. I was mixing 3.7 and 3.8. I thought we'd moved on to 3.8.
Sorry, okay, so I see. So, and that $50 for individual, okay, now I get it. Mr. Sturbank, did you have some help for us? Or you're just waving hello? Oh.
Yeah, no, sorry, I was speaking over my mute sign this time. The statute doesn't have a limitation on the dollar value. So when it speaks to the legislative body of the Code City has the power to accept any gift or grant for any public purpose and carry out any such conditions. So I'm not quite sure where the dollar part got mixed
Right,
in.
so
That's just that, although as you've said about other language, this first sentence is just recognizing that we're going to follow the RCW.
So let me ask, so we'll disregard that $50 notion for the purpose of 3.7. We'll put that out of our mind. But is it possible, is it permissible, that's the correct word, is it permissible for the city council to delegate the authority to accept to approve these a donation below, say, a certain dollar threshold, or does the way that RCW written require the council to be involved?
I believe the former, that the statute grants the legislative body the power. You can exercise that power by delegating part of your authority below certain dollar amounts for efficiency or other purposes, if the council so chose. But that in the absence of that, the statute and the code would guide us as to how to handle it.
Got it. So then perhaps we,
10,000.
That's what I was
do you want to
saying.
pick a number now, or do you want,
10,000's good.
oh,
I think that's-
10,000?
Yep, yeah.
10,000.
All right, will you revise this then?
More time on this than we will actually.
He'll pay us $10,000 if we shut up. Would you revise that first sentence to allow a delegation of authority to accept up to 10,000? Delegate that to the mayor?
Okay.
But, caveat though, any honorary naming or plaque should come to council.
Well, hold on. So let's say someone says, I'll buy this park bench for $3,000 if you let me put my, in loving memory of my parents on the plaque. On the, did you really want that to come to us, or would we be fine with the mayor deciding that?
I don't know what the Dave Neat House. And I don't think it, the case you put forward is pretty well slam dunk. I'm just worried about others that aren't. I don't remember in the Dave Neat House discussion whether we got to a dollar figure. It was merely some renovations to the park, and then the park would take the Dave Neat House name, or there would be a plaque. At that stage, we said it was probably inappropriate because he really had no connection to the city whatsoever. Well, and for the number of times this occurs, no, I would still want the naming to come here.
Okay, there you go. Write it that way.
Okay.
So any naming to us, but the ability to accept up to 10,000.
Okay.
Unless, when you discuss it with the mayor, you really think we should rethink that, in which case come back and ask us to rethink it one more time.
Yep,
Yeah,
will do.
Mr. Sturbank.
I'm sorry, I'm lowering the hand.
Oh, no
I was
problem.
told previously.
So this time you were just waving at us. Okay.
Correct.
All right, 3.8, which city administrator has been very eager for us to get to.
Well, yeah, the RCW 42.52.150. No state official or state employee may accept gifts other than those specified in blah, blah, blah section with an aggregate value in excess of $50 from a single source in a calendar year, or a single gift from multiple sources with a value in excess of $50. So, as I said
That's where it
earlier,
applies, yeah.
most cities just adopt by reference, that RCW. So it's a set dollar amount that we can apply to employees.
Okay, but wait, let's back up. This is not a financial policy.
Right.
This paragraph should be just taken out.
We do already have it covered in the Snoqualmie Code of Ethics. This is already there,
Okay.
so it's redundant.
Right.
Okay. Huh. We have finished revenues.
Yay.
So what is our work plan from here? I've forgotten, do we have, where were we hoping to be tonight? Were we hoping to be done? Do we have another session planned? So where are we at?
Well, we were certainly hoping to be done. However, I want to check the budget, the calendar for the next date. And I do recall that there was a kind of a crossroads then, based on the finance and administration's, finance and administrative committee's work. So I want to find that budget, bear with me.
I found it.
Okay.
So on August 8th, we were supposed to review it with the regular council. That'd be Monday. We do have a special workshop. Well, we could look at the next F&A, or we can set up another special workshop. I mean, I think we have a lot of good momentum here. And to me, it's really important, especially we're trying to get to expenditures, because as she has like the purchasing card and some other things that are in there that are so much better to have than not have now.
Yes.
And so we could look at another date to set up a special workshop. You fine with that?
Okay, but are you working up to, we were gonna ask ourselves a question at the end of?
Well, So I'm very concerned that we not hold up your ability to develop the budget and present that. Or you guys won't believe this, but today's date is August. So I want to find a way to not hold you up on that, but also get through these policies. I feel we've got a lot of great momentum here. I feel very confident that we're going to get through this and be able to go to the council with a whole package that we're all going to be behind. So I want to get to that. So I'm trying to figure out how we accomplish both objectives. I'm happy to put in, I'm willing to put in more time, not happy to, I'm willing to put in more time. But I am actually out of town the next 2 weeks. Now, I could join by video conference, so we've still got some options depending what, but so I don't know, there's, how do we kind of proceed? But the most important thing in my point of view is make sure we're not holding up the development and presentation of the budget. So I'm thinking that the decisions around fund balance were probably very helpful. If that in particular you wanted us to present to the council, we could pluck that out and present it just as on its own. Because I think the three of us I believe are ready to, are supportive of what we came up with. But if that's not enough, if that doesn't get you where you need to be, so yeah, you kind of got to tell us, how can we help, and how would you like to move forward? What do you need us to do?
Well, it is important to adopt the, financial policy in its entirety, because there are important policy statements that we would build the budget based on. Now, that being said, what we've talked about briefly is things like the preliminary forecast. So as we continue to work on policy, we are going to continue to work on the budget. And as we go through that effort this year, that will help with saying, are these policy statements correct? And, oh, by the way, we want to change the policy statement because this is going to work well. And it has. So it's kind of a on the job, on the job update as we go through the budget. So if we can keep this topic on FNA's, the committee meetings, and it's parallel with the budget, because we're going to start developing it. The reserves was the biggest piece to get through, and we're going to have that red line version out there to refer back to say that the FNA committee is doing the work, and so we're going to keep that red line version out there to refer to. We're going to continue to work on it, but we're also going to start to work on the budget. I don't believe it's going to hamper that. It's only going to inform our continued work on financial policy, and I believe that we can continue on the track.
Let me suggest this then. That sounds fantastic. Let me suggest this, that in committee reports on Monday, that I report out specifically on the topic of reserves, and call that to the attention of the rest of the council members, and sort of give them a report on where we're at, but specifically call their attention to reserves and request that they read that now and tell us, this committee and administration, but tell us now if they have any concerns, because we believe that section, that we are now satisfied with that section, and that is what we plan to bring to the full council. So please look at that now, because it's very important. So, and let us know if you have any concerns, questions, et cetera. So at least we can kind of get some additional buy-in on reserves in particular as we kind of complete the process. How does that sound?
That would be very helpful.
So maybe can we do it all the way to where we are today? So
Yes.
all the way through revenues?
Yeah, all the way through
So
revenues.
Red line. All
Good.
the way through revenues.
Yes.
And then can we, on the 16th, FNA, I guess maybe try to get through expenditures? We may need to extend the meeting past 8. Or we can have a special meeting on the 17th, which would be the next day.
Sorry, Mayor, just pulling up calendar.
Well, and can we? I know we said F and A starts at 6:30 to give room for parks and public works. Why don't we start at 6?
Yeah, you'll be done.
Oh, yeah.
There's not, oh, well, no, there's some critical things coming up.
Okay.
That's, you have the general sewer plan, which you've already approved at one point already, but, and then there's a couple things coming up.
I will not be attending the 16th. I will unfortunately be camping in the North Cascades with no access to internet.
So that whole week is, if we were to shift the F and A to the
I am-
17th, or the whole week is a
When are you
is a
back?
challenge?
I can't. Yeah, I'm out that week. I'm back from the 22nd forward. I can be available any day that, any evening that we want, but I'm sorry, I'm out that week.
So next week, we have 8th, and we have a special meeting the 9th. Can we do 10th? We love these 3-hour meetings in a row. Be the same without seeing you guys.
I'm actually out the 2 weeks. I'm able to make the council meeting, but I'll be remote. And then I'm not able to make, I think, do we have something on the 9th?
That's
Yeah, I should, the 8th and 9th, I believe I'm able to attend remotely, and then I'm not able to attend remotely after, until back on the 22nd.
Well, can you, I guess to address it, can you review the expenditure section?
I already have, yeah.
Okay.
But, these discussions, I think it's just getting through it the way I just don't, I think what's worked is having these discussions, just moving through it. I think we just need to get that done. I think we've moved, I thought, pretty well. So what, could we do the 24th? And or the 25th?
August 24th?
Yes.
You guys can, I'll be out, but if you're available. Are you available?
I don't know my availability on the 24th. I'm moving my daughter into her dorm room.
Okay, so 24th, 25th, 20, the week of the 29th it's a 5th week, isn't it? So anytime the week of the 29th.
Oh, yeah. We could even do 2 meetings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We did 2 we did
Work for
last
you.
night and tonight.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I could. I'm just kind of looking at it, it's more
Also
at
with
the
the
end of the
waiver.
week, so Thursdays, Fridays with already, those are already committed.
Right,
But
29th,
the
30th.
29th, the 30th. those are-
31st, anywhere of those days. Yeah.
Yeah, those dates work.
Those days work for you?
Yeah, why don't we shoot for
Those
Monday, Wednesday
days
that
work
week?
for you, Kara?
Let's shoot for that.
Okay.
So which day?
29, 30,
30th?
31, whatever works for you guys.
Probably 29, 30.
I think the 29 and 30 would be the preferred
Great.
dates for us to.
Done.
Yeah, okay. What I will do is I'll be sending out this updated redlined version to show our progress, and then any responses to say, hey, you missed this, from a wording standpoint for, those sections, that would be helpful. And there's also some of the sections that I'll be revenue kind of, trying to wordsmith a bit too, so I'll be looking for
Feedback, yeah.
that to be
Okay.
reviewed.
City Clerk, just a moment. I want to say this because I forgot the other night, and I really wanted to call this out, Ms. Ferguson. I noticed that the check registers, the warrants, the claims report was not a scanned, but it was actually in PDF format. That was fantastic. I noted that, and I meant to thank you for doing that. I think that's just fantastic. It makes it searchable, and I was just Don't think we didn't notice.
Well, I'm glad. We are working on a number of improvements and efficiencies and what have you, and everyone's just been great to, change is hard.
Yeah.
And so we continue to work, so I appreciate your feedback on that.
Mrs. Estrada?
Yes, thank you, sir. I'm going back to the August 29th and August 30th. Are we looking at a start time of 6 p.m.? Or
5?
what?
I can't do 5.
Okay, 6.
6 p.m. for both? Okay.
Sorry.
Yes.
And this will be a special meeting of council or a special meeting of FNA?
FNA.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, we have to start at 6 because Councilmember Christensen wants to make sure I don't get dinner. And we would,
Oh, there you go.
All right.
if we started at 5, we'd get dinner. Yes, so now I just get cookies. Okay. Yeah. All right, then if there's no further business, if there's no objection, we'll adjourn. Seeing no objection, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys, for all your hard work.